When we introduced you as the CEO of the Karma Family Office. So what's a family office?
So a family office is created to manage what we call wealth transitions. The thing they're most proud of is that we have managed the transition. A lot of people don't know this, but wealth is destroyed by transitions. So that they know that 20 years from now, I'm 18 now, at 38, I'll begin a process of takeover from the next generation. And that sort of ensures that you don't get what you might call accidents in transition. I have really become schooled in transitions. And I've commenced the transition in my own family, the Kariithi family.
Welcome to the Nitpicker podcast, where we tell interesting stories about interesting people doing interesting things. My name is Musyoka, and I'm the Nitpicker. Today on the Nitpicker, our guest is a pastor and a seasoned leader. Kibby Kariithi is currently the CEO of Karma Limited, which is a family office. Before that, Kibby worked as the CEO of City Finance Bank. Kibby was also the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And prior to that, he was the corporate director at Barclays Bank of Kenya, and he was responsible for capital market activities in East Africa, managing a balance sheet of over 4 billion shillings. Please join me in welcoming Kibby to our podcast. So Kibby, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started into this corporate world?
Well, I started as a banker.
Yeah.
So all my early years were in banking. As I was looking around for a job in 1989, I was asked to make an appointment with Fred Biro at Barclays Bank.
Fred Biro is a doyen of banking, a cornerstone of Barclays, as it were, back in the day. So Fred gave you an interview?
He gave me an interview, and funny enough, because I was one of the first guys coming out of the MBAs from the North American side.
Yes.
I didn't have to go through the normal cashiering and all that
those
stuff.
People who we call Kaudo Posh. Kaudo
MBA. It was quite funny because I was supposed to go into the normal management trainee program.
That's right.
And the investment bank just picked me.
This is 1989.
They saw my qualifications.
What banking was happening in 1989?
Barclays Merchant Finance had actually just listed Barclays Bank in 1986.
Okay.
And so it had begun investment banking as part of taking guys from Australia, UK to become investment bankers in Nairobi and build this investment banking capacity.
Okay.
So I was pulled into the investment bank immediately.
Okay.
And so actually I started my career as an investment banker.
Okay. What sort of transactions were you doing then?
We were really arranging debt across the corporate side of Kenya.
And for somebody who's not a banker, what does arranging debt mean?
So many people think of a bank loan.
Yes.
I wasn't into bank loans.
Yeah.
We did a lot of the buildings you see now.
Okay.
In CBD, London House, stuff like that, with what we used to call debenture stocks.
Okay.
We did Windsor, for example. I'm the one who arranged the financing for Windsor.
Okay.
Windsor Hotel.
And when you say it's not a loan, what would it be? You'd put together a facility and then invite other people to invest in the facility through debt?
So
is that what you mean?
You created securities,
yes,
which we'd call debt securities,
yes,
and get many investors, maybe 5 or 6 investors syndicate the investment, and then get various parties to come into the investment.
All right.
So rather than go straight for a straight bank loan, it was actually cheaper to arrange these sorts of structures as an investment banker, and we achieved much lower rates for our corporates at the time.
Okay. So how long were you there then?
Actually, on and off, I was there for 11 years. Unfortunately, Barclays sold BZW, which is Barclays Deloitte Wed in the UK.
What does that mean?
And Barclays Deloitte Wed was one of the biggest investment banks in the world, which was owned by Barclays.
Okay.
And when they sold it, investment bankers like us thought, well, it's no longer fun.
Yeah.
We were there.
You don't want to give just vanilla loans for people who want to buy houses.
Banking was not for me.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, I was poached at the time by the stock exchange.
Okay.
What
year was this now? 1999?
1999.
Okay.
I had several alternatives. Was actually going to walk out and work with CDC as a private equity.
And CDC is the
Commonwealth Development Corporation.
Okay.
To start their private equity side.
Okay.
But I was approached by the then chairman of the stock exchange, Jim Nabaro.
Okay.
And he told me, Kibby, maybe you can sacrifice for Kenya. And
take one for the team, as it were.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. And why would he view it as sacrifice it for Kenya? Because you're coming from the private sector, or what?
There was no way they were going to match my salary. They were going to offer me a salary that was nice, but not really a private sector salary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it had to be, you're coming here to be the CEO of a national institution.
Yeah.
And actually, I was going to turn him down. But then my accountability partners, as people of faith, we have accountability partners.
Okay.
When I told them about my choice between Nairobi Stock Exchange and Commonwealth Development Corporation, they were like, you must be kidding. You and the sacrifices we've been making for Kenya, because by that time we had started various institutions to think through how to rescue Kenya from its then economic malaise.
Yes.
And they told me, no, Kibby, I'm sorry. Stock exchange is just straightforward. So I went back to Jimna and said, by the way, I actually could be interested.
Okay.
And so they finally decided, okay.
And were you going to be the first CEO for the stock exchange?
No, there had been 3 before.
There had been 3 before.
Yeah, but it was the stock exchange at that time was first of all analog.
Yes.
And then fairly, I would say, informal.
Yes. Was it still at the Saruva Stanley? Sorry.
It had just moved from the Stanley.
Yes.
Still open outcry.
Yes.
And I'd moved to the Nation Center.
That's right.
And started formalizing. So actually, the board was looking for me, one, to formalize it.
Okay. And
then to digitize it.
Okay.
And that digital process needed young men.
Yes.
I was at the time 36 years old.
Okay.
So that's why Jim was coming to me, because he knew I had the experience in Barclays and the digital ability to see what needed to happen. Yeah.
Okay. So you take on the role of CEO. Would you say it was transformative?
Wow. I mean, well, one of the big things for me actually was, for the first time I was actually working purely for Africans. That was fun. Yeah. Moving from the Muzungu-led type of institution to an African-led institution for me was incredible.
And so decisions are made faster?
And by people who you understood well.
Okay.
Nothing like going to London for a big decision on a big corporate issue.
Yes.
You dealt with your board in situ.
Yeah.
And so that was much better for me.
Okay.
And then also just moving from a localized Barclays Bank, really just one bank out of many, to a national institution was a big transition, because now you're dealing with things like the National Payment Center, you're dealing with Central Bank, you're dealing with the Capital Markets Authority, you're dealing with the Treasury.
So your whole stakeholder world has shifted.
It has shifted.
And a key group of that stakeholders is the shareholders, because NSC at that time was very shareholder driven. It was just a few stockbrokers who owned it, yes?
Yes.
So you were very close to the owners of the business, as it were.
You get to know them as personal friends.
Yes.
As people, we called ourselves SRO.
What does
so
that
I was a poacher. An investment banker is a poacher. Okay. He's doing deals.
Yeah. But
now you go into the stock exchange. You're entering a self-regulatory organization.
Okay.
Which means now you're a regulator. You're a gamekeeper. You're running a game park. And that game park has some apex predators in it.
Apex predators. Okay.
You've got new stakeholders.
Yes, exactly.
Both the brokers and Kenyan shareholders.
Yeah.
And they're all depending on you. One, to tell them if something goes wrong, to keep them appraised of every company that's listed there.
Yeah.
The listed companies, you're discussing breweries and the like. So you are in touch with all these CEOs.
Yes.
And they all have very serious issues they want to bring to you in terms of now declaring oration of their results. What's happening now? I want to list something. I want to do a new bond. I want to do this.
So you're a big kahuna. Let's call a spade a spade. I mean, because the NSCCU at the time and the NSCCU today are two very different rules.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the NSE was far more vibrant then.
Yes.
And you didn't have the overlay of the Capital Markets Authority at the time, did you?
No, we were regulated by the Capital Markets Authority.
Okay.
Yeah, it had come in 1990.
Okay.
It had now become a fairly serious entity.
Okay.
By the time I took over.
Okay.
And we had to work together to create the capital markets in Kenya.
That's right.
So we were one of four legs, we call them four legs of the capital markets.
Okay.
And,
which are the other three?
RBA,
okay.
So the retirement benefits side, is also included in our thinking. Banks, because they do the bonds, they do the debt, securities.
That's right.
And then we have collective investment schemes. So all the guys who are doing pension funds, I mean, not just pension funds, but any investment that's coming from a collection of people.
So the unit trusts type of thing, the REITs and all of that. Okay. Real estate investment trusts. Okay. All right. So you do your thing at the NSC. You step off, quite proud of what you've achieved. When do you leave the NSC?
So 2005.
All right.
I had actually had a long talk with Jim and he told me, by the way, Kibby, this is not a long-term job. Once you finish the digitization, plan your exit.
Okay.
So I actually planned my exit because I had digitized a stock exchange.
Yes.
The people who benefit most from the digitization of a stock exchange are the stockbrokers. Because suddenly you've transformed something which was slow, tedious, difficult into something that's really fast. It's very good for investors. The stockbrokers make a lot of money. Yes. And so I went back to my world as a poacher.
Okay.
I moved from the stock exchange and into a stockbroker, which I transformed into an investment bank.
Okay.
So the whole idea was that's where the money is going to be because I'm in corporate finance.
All right.
So, but you go back to doing what you do best.
So did you buy the stock brokerage?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you say you converted it to an investment bank, what does that mean?
So a stockbroker only deals with trading of stocks.
Yeah.
An investment bank deals with the whole fund management, investment banking side, which is what I'm calling corporate finance.
That's right.
And deals with actually arranging both debt and equity transactions for a variety of clients, in addition to the stockbroking, which is just trading on the stock exchange.
And to be an investment banker, you need a license from the CBK
CMA.
or the CMA.
Yeah.
The Capital Markets Authority.
Yes.
That issues a license. So now you become a regulated entity.
Yes.
But previously, there was a stockbroker, but you were also still licensed by the Capital Markets Authority.
Yes.
Okay. So a higher level of regulation, as it were.
Yes.
All right. So the name of this stock brokerage was?
So we bought Ashbu Securities.
Okay.
And turned it into African Investment Bank.
Okay.
Yeah. Over a period of time.
Yes.
And the whole idea there is to now be allowed to do the whole gambit of stock exchange type transactions, inclusive of IPOs.
Okay.
You bring companies into the stock exchange for the first time. So I've been doing that in Barclays as an investment banker. Barclays did not have a stockbroking license. Now I was doing it with several other investors in the stock exchange, now as a licensed stockbroker and investment bank.
Okay. Right. And how long did you do that for?
We did about 4 years.
Yeah. Good
2005.
years? Good years? Tough years?
By the way, these were the Kibaki years.
Yeah.
The stock exchange rose by 500%. So we did some really big things. That's when we listed Safaricom. That's when we listed the electricity company.
Kenyan? Okay.
That's when we did a lot of what you might call... So Safaricom, for example, was 57 billion listing. We actually collected from the Kenyan public 250 billion shillings. Every
single stockbroker made money that year.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was massive.
But it was also an operational nightmare.
Yes. We Citibank was the receiving bank, and I mean we couldn't. It was 1 million new shareholders.
Yeah.
I mean the stock exchange only had 1 million at the time, and we created a new 1 million shareholders
Yes.
from the Kenyan public.
But this was digital. By this time, we had the central
Yes, it was now fully
depository
digital.
system. Yes.
And that is the beauty.
Yes.
That you're bringing people into it. That's why you could do size.
That's right.
Yeah, you could scale all this up
Okay.
and do huge listings.
Okay.
And then take full advantage of the capital markets,
Okay.
which everybody had previous to that was thinking a 1 billion shilling IPO was a very big thing. And this was a 57 billion shilling IPO. So suddenly, and in fact, the Treasury now saw us as a partner.
Yeah.
They saw us as, let's do privatizations, let's do all these listings.
And us who? The investment banking?
The capital
fraternity?
markets.
Okay. Okay.
And of course, in a situation where interest rates were low, yes, the stock exchange just rose.
Okay.
So for the next 3-4 years, we were in
It was
clover.
a boom.
But then opportunities were still
Yeah.
very, very, I'd say, huge.
Yeah.
And at the essence, I'm actually an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a serial entrepreneur.
Okay.
So we began talking with some of my stakeholders
Yeah.
to get into banking,
Okay.
get back into banking. I was really in microfinance. I was already not only a shareholder, but a partner with several others
Yeah.
in Jamii Bora,
Yeah.
which was at the time a microfinance company. And the opportunity came to buy a bank. So we actually went out and bought a bank.
Which bank was that?
It was called City Finance at the time,
Okay.
but it was really a banking license. It was fairly small.
Yes.
In fact, I don't even want to mention some of the shareholders of that bank.
But did you have deposits?
Yes, yes.
City Finance is the one that's in town, Wabera Street.
Koinange
Close,
Street.
yes, on Koinange Street.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we bought the bank
Yes.
and merged our existing business, Jamii Bora,
Yes.
into it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's now gone through a whole gambit of changes and whatever.
Yeah.
It's now Kingdom Bank.
Yes.
It's owned by Cooperative Bank.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it moved from City Finance to Jamii Bora Bank, then it was swallowed up by
By Cooperative
Cooperative Bank to
Yeah.
become Kingdom Bank.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you bought that, but you're not managing it. Were you managing it?
I was the CEO.
Okay.
I was the first CEO of the new entity.
Okay. Of
Yes.
the combined Jamii Bora City Finance.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't actually like being a CEO.
Yeah.
It's too operational for me.
Yeah.
I'm really an entrepreneur. So I started the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I was starting many companies
Yeah.
at the time. So within 2 to 3 years, I exited to be chairman and director and other things
Okay.
in a variety of startups,
Yeah.
one of which was Heri Limited, which was not really a startup,
Yes.
it was a transition.
So tell us a little bit then about Heri.
Yeah, so I'll start by when I entered the fray.
Yes. Yes.
So in 2008,
yes.
we were discussing with quite a few friends, basically from childhood,
Yeah.
who had been shareholders of Heri, and their parents were getting a little old, and were saying, you know what, you guys, we need to create a transition.
And what is Heri? How about you give us?
So Heri
what is
Limited
Heri? Yeah.
is actually a very interesting company. It's an origin company,
Yeah.
in the sense that a generation of very young men, by the way, took over Kenya at independence from the Mzungu, basically. And this generation walked into jobs at what you might call fairly senior level, mostly mid-managerial, and within 5 years were taking over as basically the head of this and the head of that.
And this is from 1963.
Yeah.
So these are gentlemen who had luckily had good education, were in the right place at the right time, were in their 20s, a number of
20s
them.
and early 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they ended up becoming permanent secretaries, ministers
Yes.
in the government. Okay.
So you can imagine. I mean, now that I think about it, you can actually be one of the. I can actually be one of the people comforting Gen Zs. This is not new. Several of them took over CEO or PS jobs at the age of 27. Yes, somebody like Tom Boyer was literally in 29 when he was coming into government, and took over as was a minister, a cabinet minister at 31. So this is normal, actually. When you have what you might call a change in a country, young men are really the ones who drive it and are the ones who take over from their parents, because you're coming into a very new way of thinking, a new regimen. So the people who took over Kenya were young men. And the beauty about that is they were willing to try almost anything, because for them, the idea here was take the seat In fact, if you took it from Jomo Kenyatta's perspective, Kaliana matako mawili. Yeah, that's what he told them.
Own it.
Yeah. And so they were coming into government really to learn what is government. You can imagine zero experience. They were really into greenfield stuff. And within 5 years, they controlled the government of Kenya.
So they've come in at the government side, but the private sector, the larger companies are still British owned.
They're owned by either KCs or British owned or American owned or French owned, by some foreign power. And so the shareholding is definitely not with Africans. And so in 1968, obviously a new government policy was introduced called Africanization, and a massive amount of energy was put into let's Africanize the economy. Let's get the economy out of effectively foreign hands and let's get it into the hands of indigenous Africans. In fact, the first big move was made in 1973 when Grindlays Bank was bought by the government and turned into the current KCB. So that was the first really big move. And Musyoka was taken from the Treasury as PS Treasury, and he was made executive chairman of KCB. So these are and he was a very young man, by the way. He was very young. So these were the first moves to commence the Africanization of the economy. Now, at the time, a lot of car dealerships were selling into government. Yes, and Heri was created because DT Dobie happened to be one of the biggest suppliers of military trucks from Germany.
So Mercedes
military trucks from Germany.
All right.
And so discussions began to say, you know what?
With the original man called DT Dobie himself.
Yes, the original Mr. and Mrs. Dobie.
Yes.
She was actually much more accessible than he was.
Yes.
But a conversation started with Mrs. Dobie.
Yes.
Yeah, so Mrs. Dobie, together with several other, by the way, foreign shareholders, let's call them for the time being foreign shareholders, were being advised that if you want to continue having favor with government, you will need to have some African shareholders. And as part of the Africanization policy that we have started. And so conversations were held, and she was asked how much is she willing to give to Kenyans. At first she said 35%, but over time she was convinced to go to 45%. And so a group of African shareholders was basically identified. At the time, you really literally had to have mostly people in government because that's all there was. People with salaries were basically in government. But a few, and this is why you had to pick them by identifying who had actually entered the private sector as either a CEO or very close to that. Yes, very few who were there at the time. And a group of about 20 was put together to own these shares.
And these 20 were 20 Africans working in the government?
No, there were 20 Africans, mostly working in government, but a few in the private sector. You had to get a few because government officials could not be directors of these companies. So the people who were made directors of Heri, the initial directors, were all private sector people.
So 20 of them come together. So it's essentially, Kibby, this is like a chama, like the first chama.
Basically, just a chama.
So 20 of them come together, put in, do they have the money? I mean, this is...
They had no money.
There we go. So, I mean, this is 1976, you said? 1978. 73 to 73.
73 and 74. This is when it was all going on.
Yeah.
And so they look at, of course, they look at each other and say, okay, now how do you move forward? And they're told, you need to raise the money to buy these shares because this is willing buyer, willing seller. This is not at you just take over. Yeah. And so they went to Barclays Bank. So my history with Barclays Bank goes a bit far back. They went to Barclays Bank and persuaded Barclays Bank that these are shares that need to be bought. So give each individual, each one of the 20, a loan so that he gets a loan as an individual, so that you put together the 20 loans are enough to buy the 45% in Heri. And then those loans will be repaid by the dividend from Heri. So they were not repaying actually their salary. They were repaying with the dividend that came from whatever whatever DT Dobie declared. 45% went to Heri as a dividend, and that 45% paid off the individual loans of these 20 people.
Somebody who's watching now knows that you don't go into a bank without security. This was 1974. This Africanization has just started. People don't have securities, as it were. The bank was willing to just be secured by the comfort through the dividend.
In fact, and I think of that, and actually that is not really very true. In my world of investment banking, security is not really required. So when you're buying shares, the shares become the security. And that's a typical investment banking deal. And yes, the shares of DTW were perceived at the time as fairly good security.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So they come on board as the 45% shareholders.
Yes.
What happens next?
Well, both DTW and Heri, which is now effectively 45% holder, invested in several properties. Examples are College House, Norfolk Towers, Heri Heights, which is what then Colobot Gardens, as well as into the stock exchange. So they bought a significant amount of securities.
So they bought traded securities and they bought a lot of real estate.
Yes.
Then, so do they have a management company, or is it still being run like a chama?
All these are directors running a chama, basically.
Yeah.
And the directors, all these were private sector directors
Yeah.
who had basically run Heri right through from its inception. One thing I would possibly comment is that a lot of the shareholders of Heri then went out and did their own deals. Because, of course, now suddenly the foreign investors realized, oh, there are Africans willing to buy us out.
And so there's banks willing to finance the Africans. Let's take a step back as to where the actual capital came from.
Yes. Yeah. It was basically bank financing.
Yes.
And all these companies like First Chartered, all these are offshoots of Heri.
And how did the shareholders manage, and when I talk about shareholders of Heri, manage to acquire all the other properties? Because, it was the first deal was leveraged, as it were, because they used borrowing. How did they manage to acquire such large buildings like College House, Norfolk Towers? I mean, these are iconic buildings.
These are purely cash flow deals. Yeah. Okay. So you tell the bank, I have a building here that somebody wants to sell. The rents from the building are sufficient to finance a loan of X. So take a charge over my building and give me X so that I can buy the building. That's right. And that would just happen over time in terms of you buy one. Radia being a good example, that's what they did. Yes, from Moranga. Mm-hmm. You buy the building, you have cash flow in that building, you use that to pay the debt, then you go to your next building. And now you have two buildings with two cash flows.
So very strategic. Don't just do buying land, which is what a lot of people do, which is you buy your car 50 by 100. No, if you're going to look for something, it's got to be generating an income in and of itself, which income can be used to repay the loan that you take.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Okay. And in fact, there are many such companies now that's all they do. You buy a building, pay it down, and go to your next building. Some of the wisest real estate investors in Kenya now, that's a strategy that they use, which doesn't come from now.
But with that time. I don't want to open the issue of the cost of funding, because with interest rates being so high, that will probably wipe out anything. But let's go back to the 70s. So now they've acquired all these buildings, still being managed by the shareholders, as it were. Mm-hmm. Where do the young Turks come in, meaning the second generation of Heri PLC? Because you've got your 20 shareholders, they knew one another socially, doing business together, getting older in their years. Where does a Heri 2.0 step in?
Now, many of us at the time were fairly clear that our fathers were in retirement. Yeah. Our parents were in retirement, basically. And so we're asking, how are we going to manage these assets? And their vision by the 80s and 90s is getting to, I want just enough for me and my wife. Yeah, the rest is really up to you guys. Yes, but nothing is really happening. I mean, yes, they're telling us that it's up to you guys, but that up to you guys doesn't seem to have a date. You know, so of course now we began to have active discussions, one another, as to what do we do with some of these things. They are great companies, they are great assets. If we just effectively wait for someone to die off, yes, what state will we find these assets in? And so discussions began with several of our parents about saying, don't you think now, yes, we can come in take over the asset, inject new life, do something different with it while it is still in a good condition. And then by the time, we're getting a little older, we're experienced managers.
So this is the second generation.
Yes.
So a number of you got together.
Yes.
So you have to be very tactical because you can't all approach one mzee at the same time. So let's talk about the emotional intelligence required to start having these tactical conversations.
I think one thing I was fortunate about, and several of my friends, we were fortunate that we had direct relationships with most of these people. So what I mean by a direct relationship is I didn't have to call my father to call, for example, John Musyoka. Yes, he was my personal friend. I didn't have to call Matiba through my father. He was my personal friend. I used to play squash with Matiba. So these are people I called myself and made my squash date and said, let's go and play squash. So many of these people, we had our own personal relationships with them. And so when we were talking to them, a group of us would get together, like 5 of us, and go and meet Nicodemus Muriuki, for example, and just say, this is our plan, this is what we're thinking about. And one thing I learned at that time, which was very, very important, was you had to come and tell him, I have the money. So you're not saying my father has the money. No, that doesn't work. You have to tell him, we have the money ourselves. We're not discussing someone else's investment. Right. We're discussing our money, which we have and want to put into this thing.
Okay, so one mzee says, show me the money. What do you do next as the Young Turks?
We actually had created a fund at the time called Baraka Africa Fund.
Again, the second generation.
Turks, yes.
How did you fund it?
We put up cash. We put money into this fund. Yeah. People put in 500,000, a million shillings, whatever was there.
So a new chama, as it were, but given a very sexy name called
Baraka
Fund.
Africa. Yes. So we created this fund, got ourselves together, put the money together, and basically came and said, by the way, we bought 42% of the shares.
Of Heri PLC shares. Now, Heri PLC, well, it's PLC now, at the time it was Heri Limited, was private. Yes. It wasn't a public company, it was a private company.
It's actually a PLC.
Now it's a public company, and what we mean by public meaning it's got more than 50 shareholders rather than listed on the stock exchange. There's two kinds of public. So by this time, was it a private company or was it a public company?
It was a public company.
So it had more than 50 shareholders.
No. So when you are private,
yes,
we normally say that you have to have a maximum of 50, but actually, we normally say that once you go above 7, you can actually be public. Okay. So Heri was already a public company.
Okay.
So you could go to someone and approach him to buy his shares.
Yes. And
it's just willing buyer, willing seller.
Okay. Yeah. I see. So there was an over-the-counter trading of the shares.
We did an over-the-counter trade.
So Baraka Africa manages to acquire 42%.
Yes.
So there's a balance 58%. Of the 42, was it all the shareholders who sold or just a few?
Just 4.
Just 4 shareholders. Mm-hmm. But they didn't sell everything?
They sold everything.
They sold
all
everything.
Their shares at that time that they held in Heri.
So now you only have 16 shareholders to deal with. Because 4 have sold and you've got about, let's say...
Well, by this time, Heri had actually grown to 29 shareholders.
29?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, so when we bought 4, there were still 25 shareholders, including ourselves. So when I'm saying we bought 4, I'm saying we bought from 4 families.
That's right.
But we ourselves still held shares. So the guys who had come together were more than 5 families. And so they already had their own, say, 20% in Heri. It was generally speaking about 5% each. And so that gave us a majority in the company.
All right. Yeah. And what was the reaction of the other non-sellers, as it were? Were they happy to have the Young Turks? I mean, it's always a bit uncomfortable when you've got new people on the seat, especially if there's a generational change and they're looking at a generational change happening before their very eyes.
The majority were very happy.
Okay.
Because one, and I speak as a parent here, every parent wants to know, my son has come of age. This is real. He's put together his own money and come and said, can we take this forward? So the majority were very happy and worked with us to create the transition to us Young Turks being majority directors. Okay. Yes, a few had to be talked to quite a bit.
That's right.
And persuaded over time. Yeah. But I would say that earlier adopters were actually in the majority.
Okay.
And then we persuaded others to just quietly accept that a group has come, they have new ideas, they want to take this thing to the next level. And really, the transition is now here with us.
So, you're pretty much asking them, give us the keys to the house, give us the keys to the checkbook. So the so the early majority says, okay, fine, we think we can trust you. But I'm sure they want structures, Kibby, by this time. They want to see structures that will allow for some level of oversight, for some level of reporting, because you've come on board. And is this how you became the chairman at the time?
Yes, so we had to introduce the concept of governance. In reality, I must admit, looking back now, governance was actually a new thing because, of course, in the stock exchange, that's one of the things I had now been bringing into listed companies and really pushing hard. Independent directors was very new. These guys were just friends. Let's admit,
and family friends at that. This is
you've just been
10-year long,
and then
friendship.
Of course many of them had been in school together.
Yes.
So you're not even talking about a friendship of just work.
That's right.
These guys were in school together. Yes. So now we were bringing this new idea of governance, of independent directors, of a CEO. So
of accountability.
Yes,
and
all this time Heri had no CEO.
That's right.
It was just a group of guys who got together and made a decision. Buy this, do that. Yeah. But now we were bringing into the whole question of let's get a completely independent CEO with a completely independent secretariat that will actually run this thing. And we will come as shareholders and have maybe out of 9 directors, we'll have 5, but 4 will be independent.
What year was this now?
This is now between 2008 and 2016.
Okay.
Massive change. By then, not all the young Turks were absolutely convinced about the governance part. So
even amongst yourselves,
yes, we had to now tell people what is governance. Yes, in fact, one thing I'm very proud of is that that's what you teach. What is governance? But it was new, and many of us who are in the space forget that this space is about listed companies. It's a very small space of very few really large corporates in Kenya that you do this, and now we're trying to introduce people who have never even heard the word governance. And so we're basically training.
And this is at an older level, the older shareholder level, and at your RICAs.
It was really my RICA.
Really?
I mean, you please remember some of our parents. These were people who ran the country.
That's right.
So they were not about to listen to us about how to run things. Yes, they were about to listen to us because we were coming and saying we can take over this particular investment and do not necessarily a better job, do something with it. Bring in new ideas, bring in new vision. Yes. Let's remember that the people who created this company created hundreds of companies themselves. And so they knew how to create companies. They knew how to do investment. But in many ways, due to a variety of problems they had inherited, both from the colonial master, but also problems inherited from the various transitions, Jomo Kenyatta, Moi, now Kibaki, they were coming to a point where really they had given what they could to the country, and now they were declining in years.
So we'll call this Heri 2.0. Yeah, the point where the younger Turks take over. So you've already inherited a stock of buildings, some stocks, and then some stocks or the shares traded on the stock exchange. What different thing did your team introduce? You've brought in management, and this is from 2008, you say, to 2016. And is this active management who are coming up with a strategy, or they are just there to sort of collect rents, provide accounts? At what point did you get to the Heri that we know today that's doing all kinds of sexy deals?
So basically you come up with products.
Okay.
Yeah. You come up with effectively corporate finance products, which is my world. And you create the ability to move something from X to 5X.
Give us an example.
That's what we do in the capital markets.
Give us an example.
Yeah? So first of all, the most important thing is, how do you buy something? What do you use to buy it? So rather than go and get a loan from a bank and buy a building, you use securities. You securitize an asset and use the capital markets to buy it. Now, what that gives you, first of all, is not very large, massive repayments. but also you share risk.
So tell us what securitizing an asset is to the ordinary man on the Clapham omnibus, or in this particular case, on the Kariobangi Express.
So how do you buy something when you're 50?
Yes.
Yes, as opposed to you alone.
Yes.
Yes, you securitize it. You create 50 shares. Yes, each of you buys one share, but those shares are actually securitized, so they are tradable. And so
where would the trading be happening?
OTC. So you basically
over
the counter. You're trading them over the counter, basically in fund managers' offices. And you bring 50 people or 50 investors, new investors, into this asset you're trying to buy. And so you are one of 50 shareholders. So that's the easiest way to buy big things. You don't attempt to go and tell NCBA, I want a loan, because they won't give you. So, for example, a lot of the time, you're buying hotels, you're buying shares in hospitality companies, you're buying shares in manufacturing companies. And so you're taking out a current group of shareholders, giving them cash, but which you've raised through these securities that you've bought. Okay. You're also buying companies' education. For example, Heri has just bought shares in Nova Schools.
So that was an interesting transaction. This is the Nova Pioneer. These are schools that are in Tatu City?
Yes.
So how did Heri get into that?
So basically what we do is we say, if you have a good operator, so Nova is a fantastic operator.
Okay. And by operator, meaning they're the ones who operate.
They run the school. They run the school. They do a fantastic job of running the school.
Meaning hiring teachers, recruitment of students, coming up with their programs, the extracurricular activities, all the things that appertain to running a school.
Yeah.
But they don't own the building.
So currently they own the building. Yes. Well, at the time they owned the buildings and everything else, but through debt. So this is the problem. You've gone in and taken these massive debts to get your infrastructure up and running. Yes. But that's not actually your business. Yeah. You're actually an operator of schools. So we say, by the way, your business is operating schools. Let Heri deal with how the infrastructure is built. Because we're far better using capital markets at creating the right securities that give you a chance to spare your cash flows from the school operation you're doing to pay now a new type of investor, a capital markets type of investor, rather than a bank. And the bank, I think we basically reduced debt by something like 100%, by 50%. So the debt repayment schedule. So you basically replace their debt with debt at a far lower level of cash flow repayment. And so they can afford.
It? So are they still the owners of the building, or have you become the owner of the building and then they become tenants and you're the landlord?
Effectively, they become tenants.
Yeah.
And we're the landlord.
Yes. Yes.
But in capital markets, that's what we call structuring.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So in a way, they still own Nova Pioneer because they run it. And all the decisions as to where to buy, to put in a new school, what infrastructure you need to put up there is done by them. But we have structured a much better way of, we call it cost of ownership. Mm-hmm. We have structured their cost of ownership to be far lower than it was when they had to go to banks and other debt holders to structure their financing.
So explain it to me like I'm an Kiambu MCA.
So the best way to explain it to you is to say, you decide, yes, quietly, I'm a creative. I want to start a fashion shop.
That's right.
Yes. And so you say, where do I get the money? And unfortunately for you, go to a bank. Yes. And you say, I want a 50 million loan. Yes. So if that bank gives you 50 million loan to start your shop, yes, the problem with doing that is that now you alone have to find the cash flow to repay the bank.
That's right.
Yes. So the money is coming from you and your poor shop.
And I'm exposed to the interest
rates and every bad thing, you are fully exposed.
That's right.
Yes. And you're fully exposed as one person.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
What we do in Heri is get you 50 partners.
50 partners to own
share
the building?
Risk. We call it shared risk.
Okay.
Yes.
But I want to own the building. I want to own the fashion shop. So, or is it that I'm a creative, so you're helping me just start focus on creating the
Yes, we change your mind. We tell you, operate the shop.
Okay.
Don't own it.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Because first of all, if you own it, the risk you've taken is far too high for you.
Yeah.
Yes? Because now as an individual, you decided I'm taking a 50 million shilling risk.
Yeah.
Yes? What happened to your children's school fees? What happened to all the other ambitions you have in life? By the way, you'll die with that shock, because by the time you're out of the debt, yes, you'll be a very sad person. Yes? So what we do is tell you, share the risk.
Okay.
Get others to come around you. Be part of the risk you've taken. Yes? But believe you enough that you can, they tell you, operate it. You're a fantastic creative. You're an incredible fashion person. We've known you for 20 years. What you've created is, this is what we wear and stuff like that. Yeah? You run it. We will take some of the risk off your shoulders.
So this is the risk of financing this asset in which I operate.
Exactly.
So I become so now you've freed me up. I've got freer cash flow, because let's say if I was paying 1,000 shillings every month, now all of a sudden I just have to pay 500 because there's 49 other people who are also paying towards the ownership of this building. These 50 people who are owning this, as it were, who has financed them? Have they paid off the bank and now they own it? And so who is repaying them, as it were? Is it my rent?
So in the capital markets, we talk of owners in a very different way. Yes? So we don't necessarily look for individuals. Yes? We look for collective investment schemes such as pension funds, who already have 10,000 employees who have given them their money. Yes? And are looking for places to place their money. Yes? Now, Heri, what we do is we structure. We create the security that the pension fund can buy into and say, I like that security. It gives me a 15% return. Thank you very much. So the real relationship between Heri and its debt is the pension fund or the fund manager. That way, you're not looking for 50 friends. Yes? We're bringing you up a bit and say, we will find the people who invest in your shop. Yes? And we will have the relationship. So you never have to even ask us who has bought my shop. Yes? Or my securities. All you will know is Heri has come and arranged a far better deal for you to find my funding for your shop. That's all that has happened.
So for my creative shop, I pay the bank walks away, Heri now becomes my new partner. All I have to do is pay Heri like a rent, as it were, and I can focus on being the creative.
Exactly.
But my cost of funding has significantly come down.
Yes.
And therefore my working capital has increased, and I can therefore be able to buy more fabric or more machines to get my business to grow.
Very right.
So if we move this now to the Nova discussion that you have, is that you freed up the operator Nova to then look for other places that they can expand. So if they want to open a Nova Mombasa or a Nova Kisumu, you can then partner with them and do the same transaction in other cities.
Exactly.
All right. So is this something that's fairly common in the educational space, in the academia space?
Let's admit it's very common in the OECD. So in advanced markets, this is normal. Where it's not common is in emerging markets, like ours in Kenya. So one of the things Heri will be doing is going forward, making it a common way people acquire assets.
All right.
Yeah.
Investors acquire assets, and also a common way I would imagine for people who are operators to just focus on what it is that they do.
We're trying to get people to specialize. Specialize in the area you're good at.
All right.
Yes? If owning buildings is not something you're good at, please don't go and buy a building. Yes? Unfortunately, most Kenyans, that's what they've done. They've basically gone, first of all, by themselves, bought a building or an asset by themselves, taking the entire risk. And when you look at their asset portfolio, it's that building. That's all they own in life. Yeah, so they're undiversified. They have no capacity to take shocks. They don't then focus on their skill, which is what's in the building, not the building itself. So that's what we're trying to do. And that's really what the capital markets does. It makes you specialize and leaves the person who does what you're thinking about, which is buy a building, do the buying of the building.
Okay. So 50 years on, it's 50 years since Heri started, 1974 to the year 2024. What would the founders, who must be very few now remaining, yeah, there were 20, they're two. So the two surviving founders of Heri, when they look at where Heri has come and the kind of transactions that you're doing, democratizing ownership of real estate assets, what would they say? I know these are conversations that you have a lot with them.
I think the thing they're most proud of is that we have managed the transition. A lot of people don't know this, but wealth is destroyed by transitions, mainly because the way it's taken over is, in many ways, unfortunately, through the courts and other such very unfavorable environments. But I think most of all, a transition, why you like to manage it is there's training involved. Yes, there's mentoring the next generation, watching them as they take over, understanding that they will not know as much as you know, being there to catch them when they make a mistake, but also being there to say, by the way, that idea that you have, so we call that encouragement, encouraging them to take their new ideas and begin to implement them. So transitions well managed are extremely good for countries. Transitions poorly managed can destroy an entire nation state. So this is really, I think what they really talk to me about is the fact that, yes, you guys came when you were still young. We welcomed you because we were just like you. We were young Turks ourselves. And we said, guys, this is how we expect you to get on with it. And they were very demanding people at the time.
So you're not getting any younger. So on a final note, are you looking at your transition to Heri 4.0? So we are at Heri 3.0 now. Are you thinking about your transition? Because there's your children behind you. They started off as 20 shareholders. How many shareholders now in Heri?
39.
39 who've got children, who will probably be where you were a few years ago and say, hey, we also want to a bite of this cherry, or we want to be influential in who comes to manage this organization. What's your thinking for the next?
So I have really become schooled in transitions, and I've commenced the transition in my own family, the Kariithi family. So I'm actually in a situation where my third and fourth generation are present of the family. Yes. So my grandchildren are already coming through. And what we're doing is training them principally in governance. So a company like Heri, much of the work is now left to independent directors and management. The shareholders will only provide maybe 30 to 40% of the directors going forward. And my children will have to compete with other as capable people, Kenyan citizens, who want to be either director or want employment in Heri.
What structures have you put to enable that competition to happen? So do you have an independent board nomination committee?
We have a fully independent nominations and HR committee, which is the one which looks at a variety of candidates, decides what we need, agrees how to recruit these people. And so in Heri, for example, we have fully professionalized. Of course, I have other investments which are not at that level of, complexity and sophistication. And so I'm bringing them mainly through these other, what I might call startups. Several of the companies that, example, my children or my nephews and nieces are in today are startups. And they're getting experience in those startups.
When we introduced you as the CEO of the Karma Family Office. So what's a family office?
So a family office is created to manage what we call wealth transitions. And the whole idea behind creating a family office, if your family has generated significant wealth, the transition of that wealth is the most important single thing that has to be arranged.
You create
and you manage them through this kind of structures so that by the time generation 3 are getting to 18, they're being trained. By the time generation 4 is coming into thinking about the family, they're already being trained. They're inducted, they're put through management training in your structures so that they know that 20 years from now, I'm 18 now, at 38, I'll begin a process of takeover from the next generation. And that sort of ensures that you don't get what you might call accidents in transition. And so that's one of the things that we do. I myself am now in transition from my family office. I've begun to hand over to Generation 3, and I've trained them into, yes, when the handover comes, this is how you do it.
So you become one of the wazees now.
Yes.
The
Now
old
I'm very
cantankerous
much-
wazees.
I'm there. I give advice. I point direction.
Yeah.
I say, I saw that mistake in 1977.
Yeah.
So that's all you do.
Yes.
You don't really expend a huge amount of energy in management or operations. You continue to give some vision.
Yeah.
Yes, because they still need to understand where did this vision come from and some history. But the good thing for me, because I'm a serial entrepreneur, I continue to start companies. And then as I start the company, I know in about 2 years' time, oh, by the way, I'll hand it over to you. I'll just start it because that's my talent.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kibby. As we come to the end, there's 3 questions that we like to ask. The first question is, what's your top food destination?
I had to think about that one for a while, but actually I'll mention something which is just here on Gong Road, 3D.
Yes, the fish place.
3D is fantastic.
What do you like about it?
First of all, I think they're the only ones in Nairobi that can give you that massive, big tilapia.
Yes.
Yes. They get them directly from the lake. They come in the morning, and so they come fresh. And they give you the big, big fish from the lake.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of the restaurants here just give us these tiny little
That's
tilapias.
right.
Yeah.
That's
But
right.
3D gives you the real thing.
How long have you been eating at 3D?
More than 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you want to get a Kenyan experience, the place that you go and say, I need to just get and understand what's going on in this country, how people think, a good Kenyan vibe, where do you go?
Now, that's interesting because many people don't know that I come from Kirinyaga. And I'm very, very not only proud of my county, but I spend a lot of time in it. So I spend maybe at least 20% of my time in county doing a variety of things. And so I have favorite eating spots, favorite places I stay. I don't always stay at home.
Okay.
Lots
of hotels coming up. In fact, I've been telling people that Kirinyaga looks like it's going to become the next Naivasha, the next places where people go, because there's a lot of resorts, and now with the dueling of the carriageway, I'm seeing a lot of lounges and bars and activity on the highway.
Sagana is going to be incredible.
Yes.
I mean, along the Tana River,
Yeah.
whitewater rafting, I mean, the works. Yeah, so actually now we're spoiled for options.
Yeah.
There used to be a time when there were no swimming pools in Kirinyaga. So forget about anything else, even a swimming pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I think we have more than 10, with about 15 what I'd call 3 to 4 star resorts. Yeah, because of what you're talking about, the fact that for a 10-kilometer stretch of the Tana, you're on the big dual carriageway.
That's right.
And so people have invested big time. And so there's tremendous choice. But when I want to get away, I go to the mountain. I like the mountain.
Yeah.
I've climbed
The mountain
it.
is big. So you say you like the mountain, you like being proximity to the mountain, or you like climbing the mountain?
Climbing the mountain, being on the mountain.
Yes.
Yes. I'm a director of Mountain Lodge, which is one of the lodges at 8,000 feet. I normally go to Castle when I'm at home. Castle is about 8,500 feet.
Where is Castle? I see that as a hiking destination.
It's on the Kirinyaga side.
Yeah.
So it's actually about 4 kilometers from my home in Kirinyaga, but it's from Kutus 10 kilometers into the forest and into the national park. Not really a good climbing side. So we're still working very much on the Narumora side and the Chagora side for mountain. But yes, I love mountains. I love mountaineering. And I want Kenyans to begin to also join this group of mountaineers, early mountaineers,
Thank
and
you.
also love the mountain.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kibby.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Kibby Kariithi is definitely an interesting person, giving interesting stories about very interesting things. Thank you for joining today's Nitpicker podcast.